So this goal of this conversation is to learn more about Kite Magnetics, your journey as a founder, and curious also about, how you find it as an entrepreneur academic, running a deep tech startup, raising venture capital from people like Alan.
Certainly.
So, Richard, do you want to tell us a little bit more about
Certainly.
Kite?
Of course. Well, as you know, my name is Dr. Richard Parsons. I'm the founder and CEO of Kite Magnetics. Kite Magnetics, in a nutshell, it's an advanced materials manufacturing company. We enable electric cars, electric trucks, electric boats, and even one day electric planes to travel further and carry more by making their electric motors lighter and significantly more efficient. And we do that through a new magnetic materials technology called Aeroperm. Aeroperm looks like a thin, shiny metallic foil. Got some here in your account.
Can you bring some over?
Yeah, please. So Aeroperm's a new magnetic material that, when turned into the stationary part of electric motors, allows those motors to be smaller, lighter, and more efficient. So therefore, we can travel further on the same size battery pack, which is really important because today, around the world, people are buying a lot less EVs than they were only a year ago. And the reasons why are pretty clear. EVs today, unfortunately, they can't quite drive far enough, and they're still too expensive.
Yeah.
And so while the automotive companies are spending many, many billions of dollars developing new battery packs, there's actually a way we can make these cars drive further and cost less today using this new materials technology in their electric motors. And so this technology, it originated from Monash University, where I worked for about 10 years as a researcher in the lab, along with Professor Kiyono Suzuki, developing this new materials technology. It originated from a lot of work done with automotive companies like Toyota Motor Corporation and others. And now today we've left the university, we're commercializing the tech independently at Kite Magnetics.
Wow. So how did you find the transition from being a scientist at Monash University to now an entrepreneur? Was it something you always wanted to do, or was it something that came to you later?
Yeah, definitely. I've always had an interest in business, interest in entrepreneurship outside of academia, but it is a very different lifestyle for sure. So when I was working in the university, I was in the laboratory on a daily basis. I was at the bench. I would often come in and I might wave hi to a colleague in the morning, and I might wave goodbye in the evening, and that might be the totality of my interactions throughout the day. And that was my happy place for many years. Being an entrepreneur, being especially the founder and the leader of a company,
Not happy anymore?
It's a completely different journey. Now most of my time is spent having conversations like this, talking with investors, potential employees, customers, and of course strategizing and managing the business. And so now it's much more about those interpersonal connections. And while I still enjoy and get to use that engineering side, it's now much more about building relationships and understanding the needs of potential customers and investors and so on.
Yeah. I remember first the time we met, like actually during the pandemic.
Right.
That's a remote meeting,
Yes.
actually. So we made the investment before actually we see in person.
You and every other investor in that.
Right? Yeah, and other investor as well.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen Richard in person before that. And I still remember one thing you mentioned in your child time, you like to make like small kind of gears and all these things as well.
So I say I'm an engineer through and through, in that my upbringing involved pulling things apart at the kitchen table. It was pretty much required between myself and my brother, and uncles and aunts and cousins are all engineers. So I grew up around that. And that influenced me as well into the engineering side of academia, doing the research. What got me interested in taking this technology out of the laboratory was this understanding that this technology, it is so important. Today, about half of all the energy we produce, electricity we produce, ends up in electric motors in some way or another. And that energy, unfortunately, electric motors aren't perfectly efficient. So we do waste quite a bit of that energy. And with this technology, we can save ourselves having to build entire wind farms or nuclear power plants or solar panel farms by making the end use case, the electric motors, more efficient. I also knew that new technologies typically take around 20 years to go from laboratory to widespread adoption. And that's too long. And so I really wanted to try and push this forward out of the lab as quickly as possible. And while definitely bigger companies could have licensed the technology and gone with it, I didn't have confidence they'll do it fast enough or that they'll make it a big enough priority. So that's why I left academia and raised the funding to start Kite.
How did you prepare to go from being a postdoctoral researcher
Yes, I'm lecturer,
to being a founder? Like, how did you prepare yourself for that journey and transformation?
It was probably an 18-month transition for me. So while I was still at the university, I made a point of doing what all good founders do and going out and researching, so reading the books, listening to the podcasts and watching the videos online. But also I made an effort to get involved in some startup accelerators. So here in Australia, things like StartMate and OnPrime through the CSIRO. And also reached out cold and connected with a lot of other founders, and specifically founders who had come from a university background and started their own companies and learnt both the good and the bad, what had worked on that journey for them. So challenges around raising capital or licensing the technology from the university, or finding the first employees. And I ended up building a long, many hundreds of conversations, a long list of things that I wanted to do in the business and how I'd run things, and forming that idea from there.
Nice. And regarding one, I feel a lot of times like, especially those researchers talking about the difficulty or complexity of licensing out the IPs from the university and spin off a startup.
Yes.
So any advice from you to those future founders and our current researchers?
Yeah, certainly. So spinning a technology out of university, it's always challenging. There's many different stakeholders. There's different motivations for those stakeholders. So you've got perhaps the academic researcher on one side, you've got the university on the other, who wants and rightly should get good value for that intellectual property. You've got the investors who want to see things move as fast as possible. And so my advice to academics coming out of university is to go talk to people who've been through that process. Understand the different vantage points of different stakeholders. So when you come to the negotiating table, you know what is a good lever to pull in different scenarios, and talk to other founders and do your best to build up a deal book of other deals from universities across Australia and less so around the world, so that when you talk to the university as an independent person, not as your university wearing hat, but as your startup wearing hat, you can say, well, this is what the average is. These are the deals that are being done. And if the deal being suggested to you is quite different, you can say, well, here's where I want to be, and here's why, and here's examples of how that's worked really well for other businesses. Without that, it's quite difficult to know what is the norm in this space.
Nice.
And it probably gives the university tech transfer office like assurance that you're going to be able to take this tech and realize the potential of the tech too.
Yeah. So if you rely on the university to make all of your introductions and to connect you with investors and connect you with other founders, you might get some fantastic, you probably will get some fantastic introductions, but you're not going to build up that muscle of how do you find your own connections, how do you build your own relationships, and importantly, get some independent advice from perhaps the preferred connections through the university.
That makes sense. Yes.
So how did the two of you meet?
How did we meet? It's a long time ago.
I think we were introduced by Investable.
I believe so.
Yeah. So basically, the co-investment is quite important in terms of venture investing in the ecosystem, and we also did a very deep due diligence of you guys, engaged the scientists from Japan and China to do a very thorough understanding of your technology and some technical metrics. Although I studied physics, I almost forgot all of those metrics.
It's always very niche, these technical subjects.
Yes.
So I don't envy you as an investor having to understand these different opportunities in front of you. It's quite challenging, I imagine.
Yeah. But you need to sometimes you need to understand the underlying theory, or then you know whether this is something really feasible to scale up.
Yes. Yeah. Knowing that it's physically possible is always a good start.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And do you think that's a particular challenge around deep tech investment is having to be confident of the feasibility of the technology and the potential for scale? Because that's a common concern across a lot of deep tech.
I agree. I guess especially for Australian deep tech investment, that's quite important because in US or in China, usually the investors, they focus on one area. Like let's say an investor manager only looking into the chip manufacturing. So they have really deep tech knowledge. Usually those investors actually, investment manager, usually they come from the industry. They already have lots of tons of knowledge about this. But in Australia, I guess there's excellent technology coming out from different areas randomly sometimes. So you need to have a really quick understanding of the technology and whether this technology can be replicated outside of the labs. So I guess that require the investor to have a very strong knowledge, the one, and but also a very good learning study skill as well. So getting into the technology quicker and also engage some industrial experts and the technical experts to do the DD. Yeah, that's probably.
Okay. And Richard, how have you found the experience you've raised from Australian investors? You've also sure reaching out to international investors. Do you see a difference in the way you pitch? You have to pitch the company to different investors. Is it a difference in geography or is it difference in background and?
Definitely, there's very big differences. Yeah. So here in Australia, local investors typically running much smaller checks. Historically, the valuations have also been a fair bit lower than, let's say, in the Valley, in the US. What I've also noticed is that, particularly in the US investors, they're getting pitched all day, every day, some pretty crazy, ambitious ideas. And so their tolerance for, let's say, really big visions is perhaps a bit bigger than it is in Australia. So if you go and pitch investors in Australia with a wild idea, space related, doing something on the moon, you might get less reception than in the US when they'll say, yes, let's go for it.
So is this also a wide idea?
What's this?
I mean, the kite.
Well, look at Kite. We've been able to start small, demonstrate the technology works at different scales, and that gets comfortable with your local Australian investors. But we've also been very careful to show all the way out to 2030 the massive, multi-billion-dollar revenue-generating opportunity to service a sizable fraction of the automotive industry's demand for this type of material. So on the one hand, we can show the next 24 months, and on the other, here is how we become the decacorn in end of the decade type territory.
And you've been able to achieve really great momentum as well, and sort of progression after incorporation between when you first raised capital to where you are now. Do you want to share with us a little bit about how you've managed to, achieve these technical milestones as a deep tech company, which the usual assumption is that deep tech is slow and that milestones happen, you expect a delay.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So there's a couple of things there. One was front loading, even before the investment came in, a lot of the work around meeting great people and getting them comfortable with the company idea, and so that they were ready to be onboarded as soon as the funding landed. So then we immediately had a team of 5 to 6 people right on day one, ready to go to start building out the tech. The other was a concept of we wanted to, the old adage of move fast and break things, but do it in a way that we could use rapidly prototyping suppliers. We wanted to make sure that we had some manufacturing capability on site. That's been really important. Whenever we wanted to develop a new part or a jig or a fixture, having to send that out, especially internationally, and wait 2 to 4 weeks to get it back is a very big time sink. And so we have people on site who are using mills and lathes, welding things together. That really speeds things up for us.
And have you leveraged, as well as your own resources, also university, sort of ANFF, the sort of like different platforms that are also available?
We have, yeah. So we're strategically located here just across the road from the CSIRO, the Commonwealth Science Authority here in Australia, and also the Monash University where the technology was developed. So we've got that strong connection to the existing laboratory where the tech was developed. We also have relationships with other Victorian universities that we'll be leveraging to develop new aspects of the technology as time goes forward.
Cool. I remember Australia actually have one company called Magnetics. So when they actually have their they actually spend almost 10 years to do the R&D before they actually have the products. But you guys are actually, all those R&D has already been done in the university. I think that's also explained you guys have a strong traction at the beginning as well, I guess.
Exactly, yeah.
Just add to something you mentioned before. Yeah.
We've also developed this philosophy, a very common one now in the startup world, of do as little engineering as possible. So wherever possible, we want to use something that's already off the shelf and then tweak it to meet our needs. It's very tempting, especially as an engineer, I know this, to want to create the new best from scratch solution for everything. But no, find what's already out there. It's probably more expensive, but it will work the first time someone else has already designed it for you.
Yeah, like the propeller. I remember you guys worked together with a Swinburne University.
Swinburne University.
So Swinburne,
Yes,
sorry, Swinburne University. Working on our parts.
Yes.
And how do you find it different doing research collaborations now with the university rather than being on the other side?
Well, now we're the customer, we're the ones spending the money. So we're definitely pushing always for as much value out of those contracts as we can get. Really looking to make sure that the incentives for the agreements are aligned with the business and our commercial timeframes. The other change there is we're always looking to leverage grant support as much as possible. While you do those in academic, you're always looking for grants. Now we have money from the company going to university that we want to leverage as much as possible through other existing grant schemes as well.
And there's government initiatives right now. I'm speaking to Future Made in Australia, National Reconstruction Fund. However, Australia is hard. We don't have that much localized manufacturing. What are some of the challenges and opportunities you see for your company, but also others trying to break into this hardware innovation space?
Well, here in Australia is an interesting time because manufacturing is really going through a renaissance of sorts, where we're seeing huge amounts of money being available over the midterm from things like the National Reconstruction Fund for advanced manufacturing. We know that here in Melbourne, commercial real estate, especially with warehouse attached, is now really short supply because that's ramping up the manufacturing side of things. We also have a fantastic employee base here in Australia, especially in Victoria. You had many decades of outstanding automotive excellence here in Victoria, which now much of that is wound down, but you've still got those existing engineers here we can utilize. And we're also leveraging international talent as well. It's a pretty easy sell to say to someone, hey, come live in Melbourne, most livable city in the world for like 10 years straight. And there's a lot of places in the world now that's a pretty nice story to tell.
Yeah, that's something probably some international or some overseas people didn't really realize. Is like Australia previously actually have a complete value chain of car manufacturing. So there's actually some excellent engineer here, especially in Victoria.
Yes, and we're always looking to the Victorian government and long-term the federal government for support with this clean tech, advanced manufacturing, and the jobs that we bring with that. And even like the raw materials that go into this, the iron and other elements, they're mined here in Australia. Maybe one day with green steels and whatnot, we can also refine them and use them in our alloys as well.
Yeah.